Czech tech is on the horizon as Taiwan prepares to open its first overseas chip training center in the Czech Republic. Equity and diversity are on the agenda at a US-Taiwan forum all about creating more inclusive, competitive workforces. A Tibetan exile struggles to make Taiwan his legal home. Plus, can tech solutions help ease the workload of Taiwan's struggling social workers? A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Rhys Ayres. Taiwanese chip giant TSMC says its production lines were back to normal within 3 days, following a major earthquake on April 3rd. The company says no equipment was damaged, but wafers in production at the time of the quake had to be scrapped. The chipmaker said its net profit grew by nearly 9% year-on-year in the first quarter, though revenue was down by 3.8% compared to the previous quarter. Work crews are still repairing earthquake damage at Taroko National Park, a key attraction in a region that depends on tourism. But it could take years before the key economic driver recovers. John Van Trieste reports.
It's a team of excavators versus a wall of boulders. Taroko National Park in eastern Taiwan is no stranger to rock slides, but this month's magnitude 7.2 earthquake has destroyed bridges and rendered hiking trails impassable, leaving the park closed indefinitely. Repairs are moving ahead with the same urgency as other cleanup and demolition work. This park draws millions of tourists to the area each year. It's a vital asset in a part of Taiwan where tourism is key. Park officials say there's a mix of good and bad news.
本来初步判断是会比较轻微，不过这次管理处的同事进去勘察又真的会比我们初步判断的还要严重。坠入古道啊，或九曲洞等等，可能就是尽量来努力。那我初步如果可以的话，我们希望能够在年底有一个初步恢复的一个景观出来。
And a few of the most popular sites could even reopen in as little as 3 months. Still, there are warnings that a full recovery may be a long way off.
从921的地震的经验，或者从日本大地震的这些经验，要让一个地区要让它稳定下来，恐怕需要的时间要到10年以上。有一些这个步道啊，其实是临崖的，这些呢都是大自然存在的一些风险。
Hotels damaged by this earthquake have already laid off more than 100 workers. And shops catering to tourists remain closed as bookings drop to around 10% of normal numbers. With key attractions like Taroko National Park closed, the tourism industry that sustains many of the earthquake's survivors can only try and limp along. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Rescue workers and survivors of the Hualien earthquake are being offered free counseling services. The eastern county of Hualien, the area affected the worst by the quake, is offering therapy for people experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder. Search and rescue workers are particularly vulnerable to PTSD.
巨石压过以后又5、6天了，无论是视觉上的冲击，还是味道上，甚至精神上的冲击，你都可以发现，那个其实冲击力度是有的。
The Health Ministry says it's come up with a way to make social workers' lives easier. But as John Van Trieste reports, this high-tech solution doesn't meet all the demands these workers have made in recent protests.
Just short of a month after social workers took to the streets demanding better conditions, the Health Ministry has unveiled a computer program it says will take much of the burden out of social work. Some features, like voice-to-text transcription for note-taking, are already standard on the average smartphone. But the developers say even this will make a big difference.
语音转文字档的部分整体来算可以缩减到12万个小时，以1年为做一个估算。
And there are other features you won't find on your phone or tablet. Smart maps will give social workers a glance at support and other resources available nearby. There's a smart risk assessment feature that tells social workers about the environment of the household they're about to visit. And there's a virtual reality training program, too.
当它风险高的情况之下，就可以依照这样一个风险的程度来跟警察请求协助。希望说，社工如果他要去做家访的时候，他或许就可以再看一下，说，他要针对哪一个题目、哪一个主题，再自我再强化一点。
Some social workers who've given the platform a try have good things to say.
风险预警的部分，评估它的那个风险程度是高中低。那这个部分我觉得在实务上做家访是很有帮助的。我们可以预先做一些因应。
But while it may be helpful, this platform doesn't address several key demands from social workers, among them a re-examination of pay and workload. While the platform is set to be used by over 100 social welfare stations, plus dozens of mental health and abuse crisis centers, it might not be all frontline workers there had hoped for. Justin Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Tensions spiked in the Taiwan Strait this week. That's after China scrambled jets in response to a US Navy plane between China and Taiwan. Beijing described the US's move as public hype, while Washington said it was upholding freedom of navigation. It comes just after a rare meeting between US and China's defense chiefs. Reporter Rick Glowett spoke to political scientist Chong Jia-ian to find out more.
So we saw a swift reaction and some strong words from China after the transit of that US Navy plane. Is this a typical response?
It's pretty much a typical response. The PRC would like to create an impression that the Taiwan Strait is not international waters, but part of China's waters somehow defined. And in that respect, any sort of transit that they do not like, especially by militaries of other countries, they like to make a lot of noise about it to show that they have some degree of administrative control. Whether they actually do or not, of course, is a different matter, but they like to create that impression.
And what do you think about the timing of this? This comes after the US and China defense chiefs met, an apparent thawing of ties, closer ties between China and the US. Why might this have happened straight after the meeting?
So I think both Washington and Beijing are keen to show that despite an effort to talk, despite an effort to stabilize relations, they are maintaining their position. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflation between stabilizing relations and actually trying to improve, and they're trying to stick to their position, stick to their points, but in a way such that there is no unintended and uncontrolled escalation.
And how significant was that meeting between the defense chiefs, and what might it mean for Taiwan?
So it means that there is contact at a very high level, that there is some willingness on both sides, this is Washington and Beijing, to keep talking to avoid accidents from occurring, which I suppose is good for stability more generally. For Taiwan, what it means is that the US is trying to create a calmer environment, and perhaps that would be good. This is why there are talks at senior levels, including by uniform officers, precisely because each side knows that they're going to keep to their position, and they're going to show that they can maintain and sustain their presence. But they want to do so in a way that avoids accidents from happening.
That was political scientist Chong Jia-ian discussing recent military moves in the Taiwan Strait with reporter Rick Glowett. Deadly record-breaking rains are causing chaos across the typically dry Arabian Peninsula as streets and airports flood. We look into why these extreme weather events are happening. Roads become rivers. In a city located on the famously arid Arabian Peninsula, Dubai has seen record-breaking rains over the last 48 hours. The resulting floods have brought the city to a standstill as residents cling on until waters subside.
I am from 10 years here, but it's the first time I see in the history of UAE how the rain come with too much,
And the Dubai International Airport, one of the busiest in the world, now resembles an ocean, as passengers from around the world find themselves stranded with hundreds of flights cancelled.
There are hundreds and thousands of other passengers just like me in this airport who have been waiting for 10 hours, 16 hours, some even for 24 to 30 hours.
Well over a year's worth of rain has fallen on Dubai and the surrounding areas in the last few days. It's the biggest downpour the area has seen since records began. North of Dubai, one person drowned inside their vehicle and at least 19 have died in floods in neighbouring Oman. Rain does fall in the region, but almost never to this extent. Meteorologists say human-induced climate change is making extreme weather more common.
I think it's a very normal weather pattern. And however, I think during that, for example, the previous day is very hot. The warm temperature enhanced the low pressure system stronger. And another reason is the global warming, because global warming make the low pressure system stronger and the convection more severe.
The UAE's National Centre of Meteorology is denying claims that cloud seeding intensified this storm. It's technology sometimes used to force rain over the typically dry region.
يعني لو كان في استمطار ممكن أقول لك أن الاستمطار لا علاقة أو شيء، يعني لو كان في مسوين إحنا استمطار في هالحالة كنت بقول لك لأن الاستمطار أكيد بيزيد كمية الأمطار اللي التراكمية اللي توصل على الأرض، بس لأن هالحدث لم يتم عمل أي عمليات استمطار فيه فكانت كلها طبيعية.
Cities like Dubai are just not built for these kind of weather events. A lack of infrastructure means floodwaters rise fast and deep.
Dubai City, there's no drainage system because every day is dry. So they don't need to spend lots of the infrastructure to help the city to prevent the heavy precipitation. Not like Taipei. For example, in these 2 days and in Taipei, one day is over 100 millimeters. It's very common for us.
Without the drainage systems needed to accommodate such sudden volumes of water, much of the city of Dubai will remain submerged until the desert sun returns to clean up the mess left by these unprecedented rains. Coming up, we meet the Cuban giant going for gold again at his 5th Olympic Games.
沉船，它可是世界级的潜点。看到这广阔的风景，当时的我是有恐慌症的。
我做到了 ！Have a nice dream. Discover the beauty of Taiwan. Every Sunday 9 p.m. on TaiwanPlus.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan is set to open its first overseas CHIPS training center in the Czech Republic this September. It's part of a 10-year program by Taiwan's government to support industrial innovation. Over $9 billion has been budgeted for the project, and there are plans to bring in around 100 students in the first year. To learn more about the significance of this collaboration, our reporter Joyce Tseng spoke to Jakob Yander, the Prague-based director of the European Values Center for Security Policy.
How did Prague become the destination for this CHIPS design training center from Taiwan, and how significant is it for the Czech Republic and its industry?
Prague is currently the leading place for cooperation with Taiwan from Europe. One is the political support for Taiwan-Czech relations. At this moment, Czech Republic is, politically speaking, the best friend of Taiwan in Europe. We have Czech president having phone calls with Taiwanese president. We have Czech government openly supporting Taiwan, declaring it, even writing it down in the policy government documents. But we also are the only European country with actually majority supporting Taiwan in both chambers of the Czech parliament, which is quite rare. I think it's important to look at it geographically as well, because as we know, TSMC will be building a factory in Dresden in Germany, which is pretty close. It's just a couple of hours by drive by car from the Czech borders. And actually the closest big airport to this future factory is Prague, is the Prague airport. In many ways, Czech Republic wants to position itself as pretty much the hub of Taiwanese investment related to semiconductors.
As you're describing, this center could help Europe's semiconductor supply chain beyond the Czech Republic. How does this center serve as an important example of CHIPS diplomacy?
I would say that's the kind of maybe the best tool Taiwanese diplomacy in general has, because one thing is to talk on the rhetorics about how we are similar, how we like each other, how our values are the same, which is good, but then needs to come the kind of political firepower. And in the case of Taiwan, it's definitely the semiconductor industry. In Europe, we are really struggling with keeping our car making industry alive. This huge involvement of Taiwan in the supply chain, that's pretty much what is seen as very strategic. And it goes beyond the kind of diplomatic rhetorics because it's very substantial. And the most important thing is that actually European business wants this. They are really desperate to get this. That's something what makes them very much reconsider their relationship to China, because they start understanding how Taiwan is important to them as well, not only to politics, but to themselves as business leaders, which is very good, actually.
That was Jakob Yander, Director of the European Values Center for Security Policy, speaking to our reporter Joyce Tseng. US President Joe Biden is accusing China of unfair trade as he seeks to triple tariffs on Chinese steel.
They're not competing, they're cheating. And we've seen the damage here in America.
He made the comments during a campaign stop in Pennsylvania, the center of the US steel industry. He says Beijing heavily subsidizes their steel companies, allowing them to export goods at unfairly low prices. The proposed tariffs would include 25% levies on Chinese-made steel and aluminium. China's trade ministry says it opposes the proposed tariffs, saying the US lost its competitive advantage years ago due to overprotection. US House Republicans have introduced a military aid bill that would set aside over $8 billion for Taiwan and to counter China in the Indo-Pacific. The package was one of 3 foreign military aid bills set for a House vote as early as Saturday. President Biden plans to sign them into law and is urging Congress to pass them this week. It's part of a plan by Speaker Mike Johnson to get aid to US allies after months of gridlock in the House over a multi-billion-dollar package that includes much contested assistance for Ukraine. Russian missile attacks have killed at least 18 people in northern Ukraine. More than 60 people were also injured in the strikes that hit infrastructure and residential buildings in Chernihiv city center. Ukraine is facing shortages in air defense equipment and munitions, and its President Volodymyr Zelensky is asking Western partners for more support. It comes as the US House of Representatives prepares to vote on a bill that would provide over $60 billion in security aid for Ukraine. Newlyweds expect to build a life together, but for families with a stateless spouse in Taiwan, finding happiness comes with significant challenges. Sandy Chi looks at the struggles of one Tibetan exile and his family.
Playing a song from the place he once called home, Turing is a Tibetan exile living in eastern Taiwan. After a long struggle, he and his family had built a life for themselves in Hualien, far from his birthplace in China. At 19, Turing left Tibet to meet its former leader, the Dalai Lama, in India. His trek across the Himalayas marked his first steps into exile.
那时候我就是办那个 IC， 我们叫 IC， 它是一个雷同护照的，印度政府跟流亡政府发的。我那天就比较紧张，这样，因为印度的警察会受访。
While living as a stateless person in India, Turing fell in love with a Taiwanese citizen, Cai Yongqing. The two married in 2009.
明明我们是合法，全部都是正常，连小孩都有了，就是好像我没办法自由。
As a stateless person, Turing was barred from working and having permanent residency in Taiwan. For years, he had to leave the country every 6 months and apply for a visa in India. The process took upwards of a month and cost his family almost $4,000 each time.
来了台湾很自由，但我都不能工作，每天都在看小孩，这样就是去哪里都居留证都没有的嘛，就是心里面好像我的未来好像都是，就是用藏文形容的，好像乌云密布这样，什么都看不到。
Though the marriage was recognized by both Taiwan and India, Turing's status meant he could not live in Taiwan permanently. When moving to Taiwan, he and his family had to do the interview while overseas, and they felt humiliated.
然后再来他们还会问一个最不能问的，就是你们第一次性交是在何时？这是不能问的，但是他们问，所以我觉得他们带有歧视。
In their quest for a normal life, Turing and his wife sought help from the Taiwan-based Union of Excluded Immigrants and Unwanted Citizens.
如果在当时2010年的时候，很现实的困难就是生活上经济花费的困难，还有一种困难是心境上的，就是你不知道你什么时候可以拥有一般人的生活。
Turing and his family fought for their right to be together for 9 years. Their case has highlighted the issue facing transnational marriages in Taiwan.
当然，真正的自由就是心里面没有任何恐惧，你想要说什么就说什么，这样你想要做什么就做什么，你想要住哪里就住哪里，不用问任何人，这样。
Turing finally obtained his citizenship in Taiwan in 2018. He now spends his time singing songs with his family and living free in his new home. Joseph Wu and Sanny Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Creating a more inclusive Taiwan. That's what's on the agenda for multinational industry and government reps from the US and Taiwan. At a forum in Taipei, leaders discussed how to create a more inclusive, competitive workforce. Joyce Tseng reports.
About 100 business representatives have gathered here in Taipei with Taiwan and U.S. government officials for the first forum on diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, hosted by the American Chamber of Commerce and American Institute in Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is facing an aging population and labor shortage. And leaders here say that the solution is to embrace talents from historically marginalized communities. AmCham Chair Dan Silver highlights that companies with gender-equal executive teams are 25% more likely to have above-average profit. Now, according to data from the Taiwan Stock Exchange, women only make up about 15% of board members in listed companies here in Taiwan. This is lower than Asia's average of 20% and notably lower than in the US, where there are about 32% of women on boards. Acknowledging there's still more to do, Sandra Outkirk, AIT's first female director, says she's confident in Taiwan's ability to become more inclusive as it champions human rights and freedom. That message was echoed by the forum's VIP guest, Taiwan's Vice President-elect Bi Kim Hsiao, who spoke about changes she's seen in gender equality in her political career.
When I was a legislator over 20 years ago, we often heard comments made on gender-based prejudices in our legislative yuan. Those comments are no longer acceptable on today's floor. They will be condemned.
Now, even before Hsiao has been inaugurated into her new role, the new administration has received some criticism for a lack of diversity. Taiwan's premier designate has been slowly revealing new cabinet members, which so far has been almost all men. Hsiao did not speak about this directly here, but she did say more action on diversity and inclusion is needed. For example, she said more is needed to engage with different ages as well. For example, older generations, especially in a digital age. Now, of course, diversity goes beyond gender, and so that's why leaders here have pledged to ensure equal opportunities in multiple aspects and in their own domains to together create a more inclusive Taiwan. Ethan Chen and Joyce Sun in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Record-breaking Cuban wrestler Hualien Lopez has been center stage at the last 4 Olympics. But at age 41, will he have what it takes to keep his winning streak up this summer? Bryn Thomas tackles the question.
At nearly 2 meters tall and over 130 kilograms, heavyweight grappler Hualien Lopez is a big deal in wrestling. The Cuban powerhouse has taken gold a record-breaking 4 times at 4 different summer games. Now he's aiming for his 5th this summer in Paris.
Sería mi discutir una quinta medalla en los Juegos Olímpicos, pero que se ve el desempeño que he tenido que hacer, todo lo que he tenido que esforzarme, ¿no? Con disciplina y con todo el esfuerzo para poder lograr todos estos resultados. Pero nada, creo que la motivación está, creo que...
But at 41 years old, Hualien is past the average retirement age for Greco-Roman wrestlers. At the 2024 Paris Olympics, he'll be going toe-to-toe with much younger athletes from far better resourced countries.
Cuando hablamos de Mijail de 41 años, estamos hablando de una edad cronológica, no una edad biológica. Mijail tiene un estado fisiológico de un atleta de 30 años, 32 años, según todos los estudios clínicos y médicos también. Goza de perfecta salud, goza de un estado funcional óptimo, un estado de recuperación, de asimilación. Como un atleta, inclusive en todas las mediciones, está mejor que todos los jóvenes.
In the run-up to the Games, he's pushing himself through grueling 3-hour training sessions at his gym in Cuba's capital, Havana.
Solamente prepararse estos meses que nos van quedando. El cochón dice la última palabra. Y bueno, como digo yo, siempre voy a reír.
Mijail hasn't competed internationally since taking gold in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. In the years since then, he skipped smaller championships to focus his training on Paris 2024. Ahead of the Games, he's trying to stay injury-free and build up his confidence.
Creo que me siento en óptimas condiciones, lo demuestro cada vez que voy a una competencia. Y nada, solamente es confianza. La confianza está, solamente es no tener lesiones, como siempre he dicho. Y arriba a pelear.
Mijail is on track to be the first Olympic wrestler to take gold at 5 consecutive Games. If he pulls it off, he'll again prove there's no need to hang up his shoes. Klein Wang and Bryn Thomas for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, today, check this painting from Austrian artist Gustav Klimt, which is on auction in Austria. I'm Rhys Ayres. Take care, and we'll see you next time.